Hello, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and this is a daily video blog for December 21st, 2017. Today, I'm going to be looking at the winter solstice, taking a look at the particular meaning of the winter solstice from an astrological point of view, and also we'll be looking at the fact that this winter solstice features a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. So it's a pretty unique winter solstice for a variety of reasons, some of which I've covered in several other of my daily video blogs. We had a new moon just a few days ago, happening right at the threshold of the winter solstice, just as Saturn was also crossing over the sign boundary between Sagittarius and Capricorn. So some big stuff. And now we're seeing on the actual day of the winter solstice an exact Sun and Saturn conjunction in Capricorn at the very first degree of Capricorn. So all of that's pretty significant. So today I just wanted to talk about a few interesting, points about the winter solstice. First of all, the winter solstice and the sort of lore surrounding the winter solstice is often related to the return of light. So at this time of year, in a sort of universal sense, we're celebrating the return of the light. In the solar year, this is the shortest day and the longest amount of night in the northern hemisphere. We, from this moment forward, the light gradually starts to return, meaning the days start to get longer and longer until the spring equinox, when there's a sort of equal amount of light and dark in the 24-hour period, and then we go all the way up to the summer solstice where there's the most amount of light. Then from the summer solstice forward, we start declining and the days get shorter again. Fall equinox, it's 50-50, but then the darkness takes over and the days are shorter than they are longer. Until we get to the winter solstice, which is where we are today, we have that most amount of darkness. Sometimes people confuse the most amount of darkness in the solar year with the sun setting the earliest time of day. And that's not always true. That really depends on the latitude that you're located at. For some people whose latitudes are a little bit more southern within the United States, as far as I'm aware, they may get their earliest sunsets a little later in November, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it has more to do with latitude in terms of the earliest sunset. But this is the shortest day of the year, the most amount of night on this time in the northern hemisphere. So happy solstice to everybody. I see some people in the chat box. Thank you, guys. So happy winter solstice to everybody. At this time of year, there's something that comes up quite frequently, and it's the setting of intentions, right? This is a really big part of the winter solstice. It makes a lot of sense, right? You're at the beginning of the journey and return of the light. So it makes sense that you would set out and say, okay, I'm going to, redouble my efforts. I'm going to try to be a better person. I'm going to, maybe eat less, or I'm going to spend less, or I'm going to save more, or, we set resolutions, right? And a lot of that comes along with the symbolism of light returning. There's a kind of first of all, there's a celebration of the end of a full journey. And so it makes a natural kind of sense that as we're setting out at the beginning of a new journey, that we would have goals or, a certain amount of ambition. It also makes sense practically from the standpoint of the descent of the solar year into darkness, as darkness is related to decline and disintegration. It's also, if you live in a wintry place, I grew up in Minnesota, it's a time of year where you hibernate. You just want to sit on the couch and eat cookies, basically, and you sort of fatten up and you get maybe a little some of the winter blues. And then the light starts returning, and you're like, you're just pining to have the light return and to maybe, get back into a fresher, more vital feeling in the body. And so there's a lot of natural reasons that we set intentions, at this time of year. Okay, so, but there is something of a kind, I would just call it a sort of a general kind of problem with the metaphor of the light returning and setting intentions. Light traditionally in ancient astrology is a very diverse symbol. Like the sun in ancient astrology does not just represent God and light and virtue and happiness and, you know, like spiritual enlightenment. It has a relationship to nous, or sort of divine perception, divine knowledge, and it does have a relationship to truth and clarity and wisdom. The sun is related to those things, so it is related to enlightenment. And you know, in this world, enlightenment does require a kind of spiritual ambition, a kind of spiritual desire for the divine. It has to live in our hearts, and it kind of consumes our life, the living fire, and we have to desire, you know, sort of godly things, so to speak, to transform our lives, and that's totally legitimate. But in ancient astrology, the sun was also related to those spirits that compel us to do things in the world out of just everyday, common, selfish ambition. So light is also something that's related to the ego, and not the you know, I don't mean to make the ego like a dirty word, but it's related to that sense of being a person with goals and ambitions and a sense of, you know, if I do X, Y, and Z, that's going to make me happy in this material world. So the light has also always had a traditional relationship to ambition, purpose, direction, and intention. Often at this time of year is capable, in other words, of not just being a sort of spiritual symbol, something that we want to aspire towards spiritually, but something that represents our ego, something that represents, well, I want to get cut, I want to make more money, I want to be successful, I want to be da 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 da. I want. We have to be very, very careful at this time of year that when we're emphasizing all of this intention setting, that we don't forget that the light has a lot of different meanings. The return of the light can also be about the embarking or endeavoring upon new ambitions that maybe aren't the healthiest in the world. That's why there's also another very popular saying at this time of year, which is that it's better to give than it is to receive. It's funny how, you know, this time of year, you know, when you're a kid, it's like it's all about getting stuff. And I apologize if you can hear the mowers outside. There's people doing the leaves of a neighbor, so if you can hear them, it's a little loud. People say, you know, when you're a kid, it's like, oh my God, I want my presents, and you're so excited about it, and you're you know, somewhere along the line, a parent says it's better to give than it is to receive. This is the time of giving, and you're like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Just, you know, give me my damn Xbox, you know. So you know, that's like my memories of being a kid were of opening presents. Like that was, you know, I wasn't quite that selfish, but you know, and sometimes I think we forget that still holds true even when we're an adult and we start thinking about these really noble ambitions, growing my business, becoming more in my power, like, you know, these kinds of cliches that we hear. I think we have to be really careful of them because they are sort of like Xboxes that we want. So it's not that, you know, having ambitions is inherently bad or setting intentions is inherently bad, but sometimes the line is very thin between selfishness and pride and actually endeavoring to deepen our spiritual life. So I think that's something to just kind of think about at this time of year. One of the things that can help us orient toward the difference between spiritual ambition and everyday ambition comes from the fact that there's another symbol connected to the solar year in ancient astrology that is in some ways even more important than the return of the light. And that has to do with the unchanging pole star, the symbolism of the unchanging pole star. In some ways, the sun is vacillating in its relationship throughout the entire solar year to the unchanging pole star. Here's how it works. And I will be doing, by the way, I'm going to be doing like a short, hopefully like 5 to 10 minute little instructional video with my astronomy program later today and posting that as well. So you can actually see what this looks like in the sky because it's pretty cool. At the winter solstice, the sun starts in the sky. It's at the sort of arc of the ecliptic, the line that the sun travels along, is sort of lowest down in the sky. So the sun sort of zips across the horizon from east to west really quickly because the arc is really low. As the solar year starts, as the light starts gaining, the arc and the sun start moving up in the sky. And as they move up from the deep south, moving upward toward the north in the northern hemisphere, the sun is also moving upward in the sky back in the north toward the North Star, the unchanging pole star. And after it reaches the summer solstice and it declines, it starts moving away down in the sky and away from the pole star. And I'll show you a pretty cool video on that later today. The pole star is in some ways an even more esoteric symbol for the eternal light, because in most ancient mystical traditions, the real conceptualization of divinity is found in something that is unchanging. It's not literally light, and it's not dark. It's not one and it's not the other, but it's about a light that incorporates and anchors the union between opposites. And that's the unchanging pole star. That's not even really the sun or the return of light. So at this time of year, why do we, for example, celebrate with the symbol of the Christmas tree? Because as the song says, the Christmas tree's leaves are unchanging. And there's something, whether it's Taoism or ancient Platonism or ancient Indian philosophy, the conceptualization of the divine is something that incorporates, but also goes beyond the opposites of light and dark. And so spiritual light is something that is unchanging. It's not a part of the vacillation between light and dark. And that's an easy way, right? That's a super easy way to just think about the difference between ambition that's anchored in the literal return of light and the opposition to darkness, and some kind of spiritual ambition that understands that we as spiritual beings are trying to set our gravitational center to something unchanging, to something that it is with us through all of the ups and downs, through the seasons of dark and light. So that's something to just remember about this time of year. And we have a really unique symbol of that in the sky right now, because we see the sun and Saturn coming into a conjunction. And the sun and Saturn are natural opposites in the zodiac. The sun rules Leo, its opposite sign Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. So we have the symbol for dark, Saturn, and the symbol for light, the sun. Where the sun is exalted in Aries, there Saturn is depressed. And where Saturn is exalted in Libra, there the sun is depressed. These are the spring and autumnal signs. And we also have the middle of winter and the middle of summer signs opposed by natural rulership in the zodiac. So there's an ancient, deep understanding, and you can read this in the ancient Greek authors, that these opposites are reflecting something of the dualities of this realm that we find ourselves in. And yet, like Plato, the point was to, in some ways, get beyond the flickering shadows on the cave wall, if you've ever read the allegory of the cave, and out into the light of the real sun. And at first, when the prisoner sort of gets out of his chains in the cave and sees beyond the shadows flickering on the wall, that is sort of a metaphor for our everyday impression that what we see is all there is. And he sees the source of the fire behind him that's casting the light onto the wall, but he can't stop there. That would be to stop at literal light. He has to go out of the cave and find real light. And that goes beyond even the sort of literal light of the fire in the cave. So that's, again, just something to think about. The sun and Saturn are coming together in an exact conjunction today, the symbol for light and the symbol for darkness. So when we talk about setting intentions, remember that spiritual ambition feels different than it looks and feels different. You know it internally compared to, everyday just sort of worldly ambition, which is very easy to dress up in the language of spiritual ambition. I find myself doing it all the time, right? It's common. We all do it. The sun and Saturn together at the winter solstice is an especially good reminder of humility, because Saturn and Capricorn are earthy signs. They're about ordinariness, earthliness. Saturn is about reduction and simplicity and cutting away and taking away. And the sun is often about growing things. So when you have the two together, you also have this idea that right now, if you are going to set an intention, think about the intention of smallness. In the Yoga Sutras, one of the advanced siddhis, the mystical gifts of the yogi, is to become incredibly small. It's like an actual mystical power, is to learn how to become small. I think that's a great symbol for this moment. And I only say this because I'm only sort of focusing on humility right now, because I like to go in the direction and just try to bring up what tends to get marginalized in popular astrological sort of writing and pontificating. Like, of course, it's a time to set intentions, but here's this other side. And of course, it's a time to celebrate the return of light, but here's this other side. And Sun and Saturn, especially together right now, emphasizing a new foundation built on simplicity, built on humility. You could also think about the foundation of something, beginning at the foundation, at the humble beginnings of something. Remember common elements of several stories of avatars. These are the two that are most important to me, but there are so many. Jesus, if you are a Christian or you celebrate Christmas, Jesus is born in basically a stable, right? Really, really simple conditions. And to see the Lord of the entire, all reality incarnating in these simple, common, humble circumstances. What's the real message of that? It's not, oh my God, how nice of that, like, superstar to condescend into a little manger. What a nice guy. Not like that. It's actually that it's a reminder that these circumstances are actually where we find and see the real majesty and wealth of the divine in simplicity, in everyday, common, ordinary, bare bones, earthly stuff. And that's the same basic idea, I'm assuming, as why ancient yogis believe that one of the great mystical powers that you might obtain during the process of yoga was becoming incredibly, incredibly small. That there's, eternity in the grain of sand, in a grain of sand. And that's very Sun Saturn at the winter solstice. So look for God, look for the divine in what is really small and ordinary right now. Let it fill your life. Let simplicity be something that adds to your life. It's not, it sometimes, it's hard to think about paradoxes like that. Like, oh, by taking away something or by simplifying something or by becoming just a little bit more austere, just a little, I can actually add to and grow something in my life. It may not look like it may not look big or it may not look flashy, but the real quality of happiness and wealth doesn't necessarily have to look big. So that's another thing to think about with Sun and Saturn at the winter solstice. The other story is of Krishna, right? So Krishna is an adored, revered avatar of the Indian people, and in the Bhakti, those who follow Vishnu, Krishna is God, and in that particular tradition, Krishna grows up in Vrindavan, which is basically a cowherding community, and most of his most brilliant teachings come as he's a little boy, a little cowherding boy. So it's like just a little boy hanging out with his friends. He has a girlfriend who's a cowherding girl. It's like super, super simple, earthy stuff. And yet, Bhakti Yoga has become an incredibly important part of the Indian religious fabric of society, because not everybody is cut out to, be renunciates. And one of the great things about the Krishna legacy is that the Bhakti Yoga is really about living a devotional life. People as simple as cowherders, people, everyday farmers, everyday people in India, so many of them have followed Bhakti Yoga because it's common, it's basic. The name for Krishna in Sanskrit, and you'll sometimes hear Krishna called Govinda or Gopal. And Govinda means pleaser of the cows, and Gopal means something like protector of the cows, or sort of shepherd of the cows. And the cows in India are revered because you get everything you need from them. You get the fuel for fire, you get milk, you have so many different things that the cows do. And they're simple. They're just simple, earthy creatures. So Saturn and the sun together bring together that in an earth sign like Capricorn at the winter solstice. They say, don't be afraid to be small, to be simple, to be humble. Sometimes the bigger picture that we're really looking for, the vision that we really need for our lives to move forward into a happier future, isn't found by, imagining a 12-step vision board plan. It could be. My wife loves making vision boards, so she knows that I love to make fun of them. So this is, we've had this conversation a ton before. But it's not always that. It doesn't always require that much, right? So sometimes just getting really simple. Saturn is also right now today at the heart of the sun, which is called Cazimi. This is a really special consideration. When Saturn is conjoined, any planet is conjoined within about 15 minutes of an exact conjunction to the sun, you have said that the planet is sort of seated on the throne. It's sort of empowered. It's empowered by the sun, right? So right now, Saturnine things are just stronger. And Saturn is in its own sign, and it's a feminine sign. So, whether it's, getting real, taking stock, cleaning up, getting down to the simplest truths, setting a foundation, these things are really greatly empowered right now. And sometimes also, when I say these things, when astrologers say these things, it's easy to sort of go like, okay, so I got to set an intention, I got to get simple, I got to really there's nothing to even do. So much of astrology is not really telling us something to do as much as it's telling us about the season that we're in, the moment that we're in. And moments, it's not like, and we're used to everything in our culture being so quick, so instant. Usually astrological transits take a week, 2 weeks to really feel and see and watch. And those are the quick ones, right? Those are the fast ones. Sun-Saturn conjunction takes place over the course of like 2 weeks. And the orb of the sun with Saturn in ancient astrology is like 15 degrees. So you have like this, everything that I'm talking about today, if it doesn't make total sense today, if it's not like, striking the bell of your heart, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. Like astrology is not supposed to do that, especially not, even though I write a daily horoscope, it's the real purpose of writing a daily horoscope is to tune people into listening so that they can start to identify, this past couple of weeks building up to, and the past couple of weeks after this winter solstice, there's some of these qualities are sort of in the air. They're subtle. You can't, most of the time we don't notice. Think about this. Sit down and meditate, right, for an hour. Oh, who can do that, right? Not a lot of us can just sit and meditate for an hour. But then try this. If you can meditate for a full hour, take catalog of every single thought that you have for the full hour. I don't know anybody who could do that either, let alone meditate for an hour. Now, let's just imagine that you have that same recall of every thought that you had, and then I want you to explain where every single thought came from. Where did every single thought come from? Why was it there? Look, nobody can do that either, right? Very few people can do that. And yet we walk around acting as though we're fully conscious of everything, we're fully in control of everything, and we know exactly why we're doing and acting every single way that we are, right? Or we're very easily able to, on the fly, sort of tell a story to ourselves about why we're doing everything the way that we are. That's why people meditate. That's why people practice mindfulness, because it's nice to actually have a little bit more reflectiveness as to why we're acting and doing and behaving the way that we are. It's no exception with astrology. Astrology isn't, here so that you can, jump on board with your ultra lucid, 24/7 tuned in, perfectly conscious willpower and use it to your advantage. It's actually there like meditation to help you reflect on what's happening that you're usually not aware of. that you're usually not as tuned into. And being tuned into it, you can develop a little bit of reflective distance, which increases your patience, which increases joy, which increases happiness. But it's not happiness that's rooted in the ups and downs of the material world. It's transcendental. Astrology is here to help us with that. So all of that is a very long way of saying this little broadcast today and the things we're talking about is something to try to pay attention to happening around you, in and through you, in your relationships, in your job, in the people that are, a part of the ecology of your life. So just watch for it. See what happens. You don't have to literally go and do anything about any of it. All right. So last but not least, Saturn and the Sun does unfortunately also signify, on a more sort of shadowy note, a period of conservative empowerment. It's very possible that this is the sort of beginning moment of more conservative Saturnine forces coming to power. It's not coincidental at all that this big tax plan is being passed right now. That is a sort of shadow side of the transit. How does that apply to us outside of just like mundane correlations between the astrology and what's happening in the current events? Well, you can just remember that it's also very tempting at a Sun-Saturn moment to try to conservatively empower your life by setting some kind of foundation that you believe is ironclad, permanent, it's never gonna be shaken. I'm building this castle on pure iron kind of mentality. Just remember that the way that the sort of Tao works, even ancient astrologers with the fluctuation of opposites, the four elements, the qualities, all of this mystical thinking from so many different places in the world tells us that if you try to build your foundation with this ironclad grip, you're actually engendering and also planting the seeds of a future revolution. So I'm not, from a kind of cosmic standpoint, I'm of course immediately and practically, I'm worried about the tax plan stuff, right? Like it sucks. But from a sort of cosmic standpoint, I also know that there is, as the Tao teaches us, the I Ching teaches us, there is a secret seed of revolution that has been planted in this moment. Because Saturn, as much as Saturn loves to rule the golden age with this sort of, he can be that like stern patriarch who's taken us back to John Wayne's day or whatever. Saturn falls. Zeus, which is spring compared to Saturn's winter, eventually usurps Saturn, and that happens. So whatever you're doing right now, just trust that if there's some kind of period of austerity coming in that you're not in control of, or if you're trying to be too tight, too controlled, too harsh, too severe, too stern, you are also planting the seeds for an eventual breaking of the paradigm. And the more ironclad we make things, usually the more destructive it is when the structure falls later. So that's just something else to think about in closing. I hope that you all have a very beautiful winter solstice. I'm thankful for all of you as my readers and my friends. By the way, the other day when I said that I shaved my head and had a Britney Spears moment because of the feedback I was getting, that was actually a joke. People who know me know that I grow my hair out and then I shave it randomly and spontaneously over and over again for like the last 10 years. So I've been talking to my wife about it for weeks. And the only reason I was holding back is because she really loves my hair long, but I was like, I'm going to India and I don't want to have to, next month I'm going to India and I just didn't want to have to deal with my hair. So I got so many nice readers reached out to me afterwards and were like, never cut your hair because of what people think. And I was like, oh yeah, that's my Capricorn moon. I'm like, my sense of humor is so dry sometimes. So anyway, though, thank you for your kind words. I think there's about 10 days left in my Kickstarter. If you enjoy my video blogging, if you enjoy my daily horoscopes, be happy to do a year ahead reading for you. When you pitch in at 75, 100, I think there's another tier. I'll do a personalized tarot recording for you for the year ahead, or a personalized birth chart astrology forecast for the year ahead. And also there's another one for the I Ching. If you never had a personal I Ching reading before, they're amazing. So at any rate, if you can pitch in, please do. I will put the link. It's all over my page. I'll try to put it in the chat box here afterward. Thank you all. Have a very beautiful winter solstice, and I'll probably try to do another video at some point before Christmas, but if I don't, then have a Merry Christmas as well. Bye, everyone.